Well, the scenes coming out of the UK over the past few weeks have been absolutely shocking. Race riots have broken out in major cities up and down the country between the British people and large mobs of angry Muslim men, often carrying knives and swords and wearing balaclavas. The main thrust of these riots kicked off last week when news broke that a man of Rwandan heritage went on a stabbing spree at a children's dance party and killed 3 young girls. But all of this has been building up in the UK for quite some time now, and it seemed inevitable that something like this was going to happen in a country that has opened up its borders to record levels of mass immigration. So what's really going on here? The legacy media is telling us one thing, that this is being fueled by the dangerous far right, but from what we know in Canada, what the media tells us is oftentimes nowhere near the truth. So to help us parse through what's real and what's not, we are joined by Calvin Robinson, the UK-based political commentator, ordained priest, as well as the host of Calvin's Common Sense Crusade on the Lotus Eaters podcast network. Calvin, thank you so much for joining us on the show. And how did all of this really kick off?
Well, it all began in 1997 when Tony Blair said we're going to have mass immigration in this country because we need to bump up the GDP and the birth rates are dropping. We don't have enough people to fill all the roles. And he said, what we're going to do is we're going to tell the right wing, we're going to tell the centre right that if they're opposed to it, they're racist and they're xenophobic. And so years and years of this rhetoric, diversity is our strength, multiculturalism it built Britain, it's a good thing. And if you're against it, you're a racist, you're a xenophobe. Years and years and years of that has led to the situation that we're in right now. But the most immediate incident was, unfortunately, the death of 3 young girls, Alice, Elsie, and Bibi. And these were innocent young, like 7, 9, and 11-year-old, at a pop culture event, just dancing to Taylor Swift, for goodness sake, killed by an animal. And it sparked rage. It sparked righteous anger amongst the people because it was just another. We suspected he was an immigrant, but we weren't told that. The media likes to hide this stuff just because of diversity. But we found out eventually that he's the son of an immigrant, actually, Rwandan family, surprisingly. But it just goes to show that hiding things, suppressing things, it just always makes the situation worse. And so we had people out mourning. People were out upset, and during the mourning, protests started, and for different reasons. Some were British people that were angry. Some were immigrants that felt like they were being accused of being the problem, and they turned angry. And eventually, riots started all across the country. But this is just one of many instances we've had recently. We've had riots up in Leeds a week before that because of a Roma family had their child taken off them by social services, which is very difficult to do, by the way, in this country, unless there's a real reason for it. But the whole Mohammedan culture up there came out and started setting fire to buses and public transport and stuff. We had a riot down in London, in Whitechapel, because a Bangladeshi got arrested in Bangladesh by a Bangladeshi police officer, and I believe he was shot. So, of course, people riot in Whitechapel in London. This is the point. We've imported so many people. We have so much mass immigration that foreign conflicts are reaching our shores. We had Muslims versus Sikhs fighting up in the Midlands a few months ago. It's things that should never take place on these shores or nothing to do with us. The Palestine-Israel conflict is everywhere you go. You can't avoid it. The Ukraine war has been everywhere, but also these other wars of what's going on in the Middle East or in Southeast Asia. And the problem is that after years and years of mass immigration, we're forgetting who we are as a people. Christianity, British values are being suppressed and seen as old-fashioned, whereas everything else is being put on a pedestal. And so when we see footage of Mohammedans holding machetes and planks of wood and fighting white Brits with them, we think, whoa, this is not right. But when we see that footage in the media, and the legacy media says, well, these largely peaceful protests, and then in the same sentence says, well, a few cars were damaged and pubs were destroyed. It's like, wait a minute, what's largely peaceful about this? Largely violent. But it's the gaslighting and the double standards and the fact that we have 2-tier policing. So our police treat one demographic entirely different to another. All of it has been adding up over the last 20 or so years to where we are today, which could eventually end up in a civil war.
Well, that was the next question I have for you, which is, how does this get any better? What does the UK government need to do, in your opinion, to put an end to this and to basically restore sanity into the UK, because it seems as though this is just, as you point out, heading in a direction towards civil war, heading in a direction that nobody wants to see.
It's quite easy, and Elon Musk, thankfully, has been commenting on this quite a bit. All the government needs to do is be fair and balanced and say, we will protect all communities, and actually all violence is wrong. They just need to be across the board like that. But instead they're saying, we will protect the Muslims and we'll give extra funding to make sure the mosques are protected. And people are like, nobody's threatening the mosques. In fact, people from the mosques are the ones threatening us. What is going on? And so the government keeps doubling down on this, and they're saying that it's all a problem of it's far-right thuggery, these far-right thugs. And people are looking around saying, where are the far-right thugs? All I can see is there's Mohammedans over there with machetes, and us guys over here who are patriots. We're not far-right, they're not far-right, so who's the far-right? And so the government is playing this really strange game of looking at the world through a Marxist lens, and kind of dividing us. I don't even think they realise that's what they're doing. But all they need to do is come back to saying, this is the United Kingdom. And they could either be universalist or, they could be liberal and say, it doesn't matter where you come from, what you look like, we're all British. But they're not even doing that. They're saying, this demographic is protected, this demographic is not.
We're also seeing it from the media. The Canadian legacy media has been painting these riots as fueled by the far right. The UK media, of course, well, the videos of them ignoring the fact that there are knife-wielding and machete-wielding angry Muslim men while in the shot, they are, in my opinion, agitating this crowd, agitating and stoking the anger of the British people who have a righteous frustration with what's going on, a righteous anger, in my opinion. The media seems to be going along with the government in the UK, the same way it happens in Canada. Is that what people are seeing? Because I'm just trying to figure out why the media is doing this. Why the media is doing this to their own people.
It's absolutely insane, Harrison, when you see Mohammedans on the screen putting their gun signs directly down the lens of the camera, and the reporter's like, well, there's nothing to see here. It's 1984. The party tells you not to believe what you see with your own eyes. That's the depth of where we are right now. And so, yes, the media is a major part of the problem. It's the establishment, the blob as a whole. So our politicians, our legacy media, the hierarchy of the churches, all the people that should be standing up and saying, this is wrong, let's protect everyone, or at least let's protect native Brits for a start and protect our borders. All the people that should be standing up are not. And so the people that are standing up are being labelled as far-right thugs. And people like myself, my friends, Lawrence Fox, Carl Benjamin, Tommy Robinson, are all standing up and saying, be angry, but do not be violent. That is not our way. It's not the right way. And still, we're the ones getting blamed for the riots. It's absolutely insane. I don't really know what to do about it.
On a political level, the Conservative Party in the UK must be held to some sort of responsibility for this. Losing an election the way they did is one thing, but it seems as though under the UK, under the Conservative leadership in the UK, mass immigration spiked far beyond what even the Labour government previously under Tony Blair was responsible for. What is being done about the UK Conservative Party? We obviously know about reform and the rise of reform. Obviously, you're now involved as a lead spokesman for the UKIP party. But talk to me more about just the failure of the UK Conservative Party to control immigration.
The Conservative Party kept getting elected over the last 14 years, mostly on the basis of saying we will control immigration, we will cap immigration, we will curb immigration. They didn't do either of them. In fact, immigration went up under them. The Labour Party started this off, but the Conservatives really finished it off. And so this is why in the last election we stopped voting for the Conservatives. And this is the first time in a long time that, first time in 14 years, that the Conservative Party weren't the party of government. But the Labour Party didn't win the election. That's very important. The Labour Party got fewer votes in this election than they did in the last two elections that they lost. So people did not turn out and start voting for the left-wing party. They just stopped voting for the so-called centre-right party because they're no longer centre-right. And so we have a massive chasm in this country. Reform have stood up and tried to do something. They managed to get 5 MPs, good for them. Unfortunately, their chairman is a Mohammedan himself, so the Reform Party hasn't spoken out on important issues like the Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs who are raping young British girls and have been for decades, and it's been swept under the rug by the establishment. So the Reform Party isn't ideal either. This is why I've become a member of UKIP and a lead spokesman for UKIP, because I feel like we need a party that represents Britain, that is implicitly Christian, as this nation has always been, and is unafraid to stand up for all of these issues, from the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs all the way to mass immigration and the illegal dinghies coming over our shores every single day. Someone has to say enough is enough.
And we've also seen the rise, well, in the wake of the Southport attacks, we saw young British people taking to the streets and looting stores, smashing up their own stores. Somehow, this situation has gotten completely out of control, and what we're seeing is completely abnormal behavior from young British people as well. What is the solution to bring them back to, just kind of reorienting young British people in the right direction to try to solve this problem the right way and not stoop to levels that are quite beneath them?
It might not be possible at this point for this current generation, because we have to get back to traditional values of the traditional family, marriage between one man and one woman, and that family having children. And we know that that's the best way to raise children. We know that it's important for a father to be masculine, to be manly, and for a mother to be feminine and nurturing. And these differences, we used to know them, we used to recognize them, because we saw the man as the head of the family and the woman as the heart of the family. And since that's been separated, we've seen mass fatherlessness. And so we have a whole generation that's pretty much never had male love or male discipline. And so, of course, they're going out rioting and doing whatever they want. Of course, they're entitled, because the vast majority of them are in broken homes. And that's not to say single mothers aren't doing everything they can. Of course they are. They're doing their very best. But that's not the point. All families should do their very best to give the children everything. We know from the statistics that if a family breaks down before a child reaches 18, the child is twice as likely to end up in drugs, in crime, in prison, and failing school. So we have a duty to teach that family is the most important thing in our society. And it's been broken down over the years because of this idea that actually men and women are interchangeable. So women can become like men, and women can go in men's spaces and take men's roles. And that's evolved all the way to the point that we now have men becoming like women. Where we have the trans movement of men taking over women's spaces and engaging in women's activities, and it essentially harms each other. And so I think actually it gets back to the common sense values of who we are as a people. Our civilized society is no longer civilized because we've lost all the etiquette, all the standards, and all the values.
That's more of a long-term outlook on how this situation can be solved. But how about we just bring it back to short-term? What do you think is going to happen over the next few days in the UK? It doesn't look as though these riots are going to be slowing down. But what do you think the response is going to look like? We've seen people being arrested in their homes for writing on social media. We've seen a serious crackdown from riot police on the British protesters, not so much on the Muslim side. But what do you think will happen over the next week or so?
It's going to get worse. The violence will get worse. I hope nobody else dies. We're going to see arrests for social media. And I think all of this is ramping up to an attack on Twitter, or X, as they like to call it now. I think Twitter is the only free speech platform we have left for social media. I mean, we have Rumble for video, but for social media, we've only got Twitter. And the government hate it because we're dissenting voices on there. And so what I think we're going to see is a real clampdown, and they're going to try and find a way to censor or penalise Twitter. And we're going to have loads of people who they paint as far-right thugs cancelled, whether that means we're arrested, questioned by the police, or the government appeals to Twitter to ban us. Something's going to happen to shift the conversation so that people on the centre-right are silenced, so that people on the left, on the hard left, can say, we were right all along. It was them.
Everybody knew that the Labour government was going to be a disaster in the UK. The Conservatives had to go, of course, but yesterday, I believe, we saw MP Jess Phillips justifying those gun signs and the swarming of a Sky News journalist. Is it worse than what the UK people were expecting this Labour government to be just in the first few months of their leadership?
Absolutely, it's worse. Jess Phillips excusing these thugs, saying, well, actually, even so first of all, the mainstream media was saying there's no Mohammedan violence, it's all largely peaceful. But then you get, when they finally admit it because they can no longer hide it, they say, well, Jess Phillips said, well, actually, the only reason the Mohammedans are out here is because they were baited out by the far right. We had rumours the far right were going to be here. It's like, no, these people have agency. The reason they're out here with balaclavas and machetes is because they're violent thugs, and they are part of the problem. Maybe not the whole problem, but part of it. Let's not gaslight and cover it up and lie about it. So yeah, our politicians are awful, and we did expect it to be bad, but I don't think we expected it to be this bad this quickly. We're already seeing they cancelled a whole load of free speech policies for higher education. They've cancelled the gender reassignment cancellation bills. So basically, they're pushing all the woke stuff at the same time as instigating and doubling down on all of this violence. And these two things together is not going to be a good recipe.
Is there any idea as to why they are doing this to the UK? Why the Labour government seems to be inciting its own people, and why successive governments have decided to open the floodgates to your country?
Well, that's two different questions. The Labour Party, I honestly don't think they are malevolent. I just think they are incompetent. I think they've been captured by a Marxist ideology and they don't realize it themselves. So they don't see that they're doubling down and instigating all this trouble. That's part of the problem, because unless we can open their eyes to it, they're going to continue to do it. But as for why have we had our floodgates burst wide open, why have we opened the gates to the barbarians and invited them in? Well, that's because we have a country that is focused entirely on GDP being the measure of success of a country rather than faith or happiness or anything else. And so when GDP is the focus, we say, well, we've got to get the numbers up. The numbers aren't high enough. And when birth rates are going down, people aren't having children and people aren't filling the jobs, they say, well, someone's got to do the work. Let's get those people in. They're quite cheap. Doesn't matter what values they are, right? Just ship people in. And so that's what they've been doing, shipping people in who have contradictory values to our own, because their focus hasn't been on values. Their focus has been on the bottom line. And that's why we've had mass immigration for the last 20, 30 years.
The situation is very similar in Canada. Our government is using the same justification to open the floodgates here. And we don't have the situation with illegal migrants the same way the UK does. We have all the geographical advantages to avoid that, but yet our own government decides to sidestep those advantages by just letting anyone in whenever they want to come in. And the justification, like I said earlier, is because of GDP, raising the GDP. Now, the UK has had some success in terms of getting anti-immigration voices, anti-mass immigration voices elected, and to raise that discussion to a higher point. To the point in which a government that wasn't doing anything about immigration was kind of talking tough on immigration. Was it because the situation just got so bad, or was it because there was a concerted effort and a well-planned strategy to raise this conversation to a political level? I'm trying to just get maybe some advice into the Canadian public as to how this conversation can be raised into our political discourse, because right now it isn't. Anyone who talks about immigration is a racist. That's what the media and that's what our political class on both sides want us to believe. So how is it possible that it got to that kind of level in the UK, where you now have people elected on an anti-mass immigration platform?
It's pressure, putting on a lot of pressure. So we saw this over Brexit, actually, that the governments didn't want to talk about Brexit because, well, both Labour and the Conservatives were happy being a part of the European Union. But vast swathes of the British public said, well, we don't want to have unlimited immigration with the rest of Europe, actually. And a whole host of other reasons. We don't want foreign government imposing laws on our country. And so we finally managed to put enough pressure on from the grassroots level of ordinary people saying we want a referendum, to the point that they had to give us a referendum. And we also had the UKIP at the time, and then the Brexit Party following that, applying political pressure too from the right. So there has to be both grassroots and political pressure. And we've had that in the last election. We had so many people on the ground saying, sick and tired of our country being slowly or rapidly at this point invaded without our say. We never asked for this. And then at the same time, we've got the political parties, Reclaim, Reform, UKIP, applying pressure to say, if you guys don't do something about it, we will. And so the Conservatives kept throwing red meat out. They kept saying, we're going to ship all the illegals to Rwanda. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. But of course, they never actually followed through, which is why we booted them out at the polling booth.
I always like to ask our foreign guests what they think of the situation going on in our country, because I think it's important for people in Canada to hear what people on the outside think about what's happening here. Like I was saying, we have uncontrolled mass immigration at our border. We have the expansion of the euthanasia regime, which is a disgraceful piece of legislation, which is just hollowing out the spirit of our country. And of course, just many other things. So from your perspective, I've seen you comment sometimes on what's been going on with Justin Trudeau in our country. But when you look at Canada, what do you see when you look at our once great country?
I feel sad for you guys, in all honesty, because you've got your Trudeau, your tyrant in chief, who doesn't seem to be connected to the people. But I saw him get re-elected over COVID. I was like, why? Who voted for him and why? At the same time, he was telling people that didn't want to take the vaccine that they were racists or killers. And at the same time as he's pushing MAID, and I've seen the consequences of MAID. We people on the right say that there's a slippery slope with policies like this, and the left always say there's no such thing. It's a fallacy. The slippery slope has been proven to be true by what your country has done with MAID. I've seen veterans offered government-sponsored suicide. I've seen people who are poor, people who have just basic disabilities, offered the solution of death because it's probably cheaper for the state. It's like, what is going on? Something that started out as an argument for extremities of people in severe pain has quickly devolved into, you call for support, you want a stair lift, you've got no money. They say, have you thought about MAID? It's like, what is going? This is evil. There's nothing short of evil going on in the Canadian government, and Trudeau is at the heart of it. Now, from the outside, I've been looking and thinking, I hope we don't follow that route. But it looks like we've at least overtaken you for the moment.
On the immigration side, absolutely, I would say so. And my family is English, so I feel sad watching what's been going on and seeing what I feel to just be, like I was saying, almost a disintegration of UK society in front of our eyes. It's really sad to watch. Before I let you go, Calvin, can you tell our audience where they can find your show, where they can interact with you on social media, and where they can see more of you?
Yes, I'm on all the social media platforms, just Calvin Robinson. I've got a Substack, calvinrobinson.com. My show, Calvin's Common Sense Crusade, is out on Lotus Eaters, and I have a show with my friend Lawrence Fox called Fox and Father. But most importantly, we're trying to buy an island. So this is something you guys need to hear about. There was an Islamist extremist, Sheikh Al-Habib or something, wanted to buy this island off the coast of Scotland to turn it into a military training camp for jihadis. He said to people, if you can't get visas, don't worry, come over here. This is a guy who was arrested for being too extreme in Kuwait, got released. They put out another warrant for his arrest. So he came over here and sought asylum, and the fools that we are, we gave it to him, of course we did. And so he's living out here, hate preaching, tried to buy this island, and the owner said no, thank God. But the Scottish government is incredibly woke, so I'm not entirely convinced the Scottish government won't step in and say something like, you can't discriminate based on religion or something, and try to force a man to sell his island. And so I said, why don't we do it? Why don't we buy an island for Christendom? This is a Christian land. Let's reclaim it for Christ. Let's put the Celtic cross back in its rightful place. And so I've set up this crowdfunding on givesendgo.com/Torsa, which is TORSA. And so people can chip in £5. Once we get the £1.5 million, we will buy this island and we'll make a Christian retreat. So anyone who's fed up with the modernity of Canada or Britain can come over and spend some time on this lovely little Scottish island.
A Scottish refuge away from the madness. Sounds like a very interesting project. Father Calvin Robinson, thank you so much for joining us and helping us better understand what we're seeing in your country.
Thank you, Harrison. God bless you.